conditions everywhere. Basically, what we should be doing is we should create a variable here outside this one. Just call it SQL login enabled, something like that. I don't know. I might have said something over here. Yeah, I think instead of setup authentication, I think I should just say setup SQL login instead of this. So what that does is then what you can do is you can put like the values over here. So admin login colon if SQL setup SQL login, then pass in administrator login, otherwise null. Setup SQL login, then pass in password, otherwise null. And then Azure AD authentication is based on setup SQL authentication, right? So either you do that, or the second thing to do is instead of doing setup SQL login, what we can do is or setup, so I think this is probably even better. So if we call it setup Azure, actually instead of Entra ID, you can just say Entra ID only authentication, right? So let's get that. Setup Entra ID only authentication, right? So what you do is you create a variable outside and then use that variable in the condition. Then it becomes easier to read, as in setup AD only authentication. Then you just pass that value, which is setup AD only authentication. And in admin login and password, you use that to either set the password or set it to null, right? So that way, the other scenario is this one, because someone can pass in an admin login which is empty. So if it is empty, you'll set that as null, and the password is valid. So you'll try to set the password, which means ideally the bicep run will fail, right? So we can handle those scenarios as well by using this flag outside here. So it's not a flag, it's just a variable you need outside the resource, right? And then it is easier to read. Right now what's happening is there is a discrepancy between admin can be empty and password is non-empty. Admin can be non-empty and password can be empty, right? And then the both are empty, then it is fine, and both are set, then it is fine. But is those two scenarios which are missing in this code, because your conditions are now based purely on one, but they are coming as a couple, like a tuple. So that is why I suggest, this will be like easier to do. And we can just call that variable and give it a value saying if either admin login or admin login password is empty, then setup AD only authentication is true. Otherwise it is false, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it will not. I think if you now try to merge this, I think it will fail the deployment. So chances are we might have to delete the database and rerun this after you've made the changes. But we'll see how. Let's first try and merge it after you made the changes. I think probably now is not the time to merge. Maybe on Monday we should merge it. And if it fails, then we have to delete the database, rerun this, and then I'll have to run the manual steps, and then I'll have to run the entity framework migration on top of it and do some further setup. Okay. Yes, I think so. Yeah, you need to implement this logic and then replace this thing and like this part using this Entra ID. And maybe I'll just change that. Let's make it easy. So I'll just when this is false, then admin must be set. When this is true, and then will be enabled if this is false and admin specify. So we are saying when this is true, then admin login and password will be set to null, will be enabled if, and then this is like obvious, right? It's true. And it's true if not specified, right? Enter ID, hold on, not this one. So we are saying setup enter ID only authentication is true if this one and this one are specified, right? And non-empty, correct? That is what your logic is doing. It is true if they are not empty, right? And yeah, and then the group Azure AD, that's fine. So this is it. Does that make sense now? Okay. Which one? Sorry. Oh yeah. So you're clear on this one, right? Okay. Cool. All right, then we can look into the new ones. So new ones, I think we need to start adding some stories. So the key thing I would suggest is you need to go through all the stories that you have implemented here, right? So there are plenty of stories you worked on. Now, some of these stories are purely automating all of it, but they are currently automating things for, they are automating things for uh, bicep and IAC stuff, but some things will require manual setup or something will require something like this. So let's say if I go to source code and develop and then go to config. So in this config right now, we have edify MIM dev. We need a MIM dev.json to be created and MIM prod.json to be created, right? So, and for each of these, you will have to then document, we need, so prefix is MIM dev UK South. So DNS zone name, we have identified this one. So basically in the documentation, you need to say, okay, for this, we need a value, right? And that way we will actually go through and try and get a value that is required. Okay. Like you'll require a group ID and the group object name. So there are two things here. What we will do is we will document this saying we need the values for dev and production, and the task will be, so in the documentation there will be a table of actually these details that we require from the customer, right? And then we will add a task in one of our setup story to say that we need to create mimdev.json and mimprod.json and then reference those values from the document and set this up. So that will be our story or a task, I would say. got that? Is that, yeah? So that way, what will happen is then we would actually create this. Then there is third thing. Third thing will be the pipeline. So in the pipeline, currently we have set this up, right? Like these values. So we will require these values from the customer. So we need for Azure DevOps. So you'll do it repository by repository, right? In the documentation. So you'll say in DevOps, then we need uh, an app ID, an app password, and tenant ID, tenant password, and application name, etc. So we can start documenting that basically. And we will request that from the customer, and we can go and update all of these values, right? Like subscription ID, etc. We will need to update this. Now, this is only for dev. We will have to add for prod as well, subscription ID prod. And so there are things like these you need to start documenting and creating stories for. So the story that we will start with will not implement anything. The story we need to start with is something like what I shared with you, is about documenting. Where is that? Oh, I think it might be on this one. Another epic. Yeah, so this is the documentation story, right? So we need to, as part of this story, maybe I think the story points over here are a bit small. Maybe we can increase the story point to 3, maybe one each for each of the, and all you're doing is basically just documenting that for each of the repository so that we, yeah. So 2 is fine, yeah. It's fine. I think, we'll just mark that as 2 for now and then go from there, right? So that way, what you do is you go into this DevOps planning document and create a child page under this one. So then we will hook that up over here. This is what I was setting up, but you can add like CI/CD checklist or action item or something like that, right? And then it will just appear under this DevOps planning document. And finally, we will merge everything into one document later on. Otherwise, this document will become too big. I think we should structure that for each of the each of the CI/CD pipelines. Okay, and then we will also in that document we will also identify all the tasks that they need to do versus what we need to do, right? So that way it should work out. So for example, DNS, they have already provided me the details, so we can sort that out. I think I have created this group names over here, and they have added some of the group names to it. I think they said they are not setting this one up, so we will have to cancel this and just say we are only applying. I'll just edit this one. So I think I just need to go and try for this one. Intra ID and the SQL authentication is required. Hence, local SQL login using admin user and password will not be set up. Okay, so that's, I think, confirmed by them. So I was just creating this document a while ago, and then go from there. I think they have already. So now we don't need all of this data. When we create another document from it, I'll remove that because they've agreed to just use SendGrid like the way we are using it. So we are fine. So in that document, I'll only add the details about SendGrid related stuff. And DNS, they have already provided now for us. So I can just say identify custom domain to be used for MIM. So I'll just add while we are here, University of Glasgow different domain names. So let me just find that. Just give me a minute. Provided on Wednesday, mymim.org. So mymim.org. So we'll just do star.mymim.org for, oh, not this one, sorry. It's here for production. And for development, they have created this one. So star.mymim.app. And that should sort itself out. That's sorted for us as well, the DNS stuff. So yeah, you just have to, sorry, going back to here, you just have to start creating that document for Edify DevOps and then for, public API, token enhancer, and CMS data, anything basically that requires the setup. And then that will be like CI/CD setup. And then we will create another story, which will be anything else that we need to do in terms of running the CI/CD pipeline. So there are a few things which I set up manually on SQL Server. I'll add that documentation. So we'll just come up with that checklist so they can start from the top and not them. We will start from the top. Then we will apply some changes. Then there are things we will do, but then there are things they have to do. So we can let them know you need to do this. And then we continue working like that until the environment is fully set up. Okay. So it's a bit of an exercise, but we have to ensure like we get that right. And once we get that right, it will be, easier to kind of switch over to that environment. Okay. Any questions? I think anyone is fine, but we cannot merge them today because because it's already quite late, isn't it? So you can make the changes, but we can merge it on Monday, and then you can just get started with this one on Monday, this story. Okay. And Monday you can schedule a meeting, and then we can consider deploying that. Or I don't think there's a meeting required. We will just review it. I'll review it. When approved, then we have to merge that. Chances are we might have to add a story for deleting the key vault and recreating it. And then I think deleting key vault, recreating is easier. SQL Server is slightly more complex story. So we'll have to create a story to delete and rerun the database and then reapply those changes for access. So we'll go from there. I think, yeah, we will have to rerun them because otherwise the access policy will not get added, right? So we will have to do all those, but that will be part of that same story that you're working on right now for Key Vault. So you can just do that as part of it. Effectively, it's just rerunning the pipelines, nothing more. And for database, we have to make some changes. But for database, what we will do is we'll first merge the PR, right? See how the deployment behaves, so that this is our chance to understand how Azure works in this case. Does it remove the login or not? And then we will look at deleting the SQL Server instance and recreating it, because once we rerun the Azure DevOps, it will set up the SQL Server. The second thing we will have to do is then apply all those permissions in SQL Server so everyone has access to it. Then we have to go and rerun the entity framework migrations, and then whatever changes I have made for end-to-end testing and integration, which I'm working on this week, I'll have to apply those changes on top, and then it will start working. And then we'll have to test it. So it's a bit of rework, but it's essential right now to do that. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So yes. So you will have to do that. So the repository should have an empty value. Right now, it does not. So your PR currently is all it's doing is it is purely making this change, right? So where is that? Yeah, it's making the changes, but what is going to happen is this will run based on the config, isn't it, over here? So it will run based on MIM dev, and MIM dev has, this is fine. Where is parameters, is it? Oh, repository variable, yeah. So I think repository variable is where so that gets passed in from deploy.shell, right? So this, not this one, sorry. Pipeline will be passing in, right? This one here. So SQL Server, yeah, this one, right? So this is what you need to pass as empty values, isn't it? And then that is what we have set up in the repository variables. And yeah, MIM dev login. So we'll have to just make this empty values over here. Okay, so yeah, just those are the things that you need to do as part of this PR, and then we'll go from there. Okay. Perfect, not a problem. Any other questions you have? No, okay. Awesome, then I'll let you crack on, get to bed soon. I think it's already going to be late. But have a good weekend, good evening, good weekend, and enjoy your hot pot over the weekend. No worries. Thank you. Take care. Bye. See ya. Bye. No worries. You're welcome. Bye.